So, battery died. Welcome to part 2. Psychosis recovery rambling. The fire is in better condition this time, as I hope you are. Not insinuating you weren't in good condition, but I hope you're in better condition. So I left off sort of being back in my home country after the lockdown had finished and dealing with people who had been fallen subject to the influence of the propaganda and all that, and being very set in my ways, being aggressive and because just that time it was like the truth or pointing out obvious things, facts, research, stats, theories, putting pieces of the puzzle together that people just weren't doing, it just had to be. I just found myself becoming more and more loud about it, and it was just all falling on deaf ears, people who I really cared about, and I was just boiling with rage most of the time. I had gone through a short period at the end of my time in Nepal, maybe a month of taking loads of benzos, Valiums, mostly Xanax, some ketamine, like real like tranquilizing stuff. And after sort of 2 years of pretty heavy psychotic symptoms, that was a nice period. It really calmed me down, but I got back to my home country and I did a very short detox from all that stuff. It wasn't too bad. And then went back on the smoking cannabis heavily, really strong stuff, really good quality weed. I think it was Girl Scout cookies or something like that. High THC, juicy stuff. I had a good supply of that. I tried going back to work, but I just was consistently boiling with rage, Wasn't able to deal with people. Never harmed anybody. But I was getting closer and closer to losing self-control and possibly, either really harming myself or somebody else, just over the relentless boiling rage that had been experiencing for like 2 solid years, So smoking, and then a so-called friend said he had some really good stuff, and I went to I bought quite a big amount of it, and bought some for my other friend as well, who is a heavy smoker. He actually, anyway, turned out to be CBD weed, which has no THC in it at all. My so-called friend scammed me. I think it was about €300 or something like that. And I went into withdrawal from high potency cannabis. And that was but at the same time, I made a decision to not smoke weed anymore. I was like, I just got scammed by my friend. I'm spending all this money. I'm just stuck in the house. The weather is terrible. There's nobody around. There's no one around that I can have a conversation with that is anyways related to the way I'm experiencing all of this. There's like, we weren't even able to comment on YouTube. Everything was censored, you couldn't, there was no open discussion, apart from whoever you knew on WhatsApp or whoever you knew in person to have these kind of conversations with them. I'm from a small town. Most of my friends don't even live there anymore, the people I grew up with. And the other ones that were still there were like in the pub and didn't want to be in the pub drinking and doing any of that. So yeah, there was no one around who was in any way on the same level as me. And so I just decided to give up the cannabis, and then it turned out that the cannabis had been keeping my rage sort of under control. And yeah, I just got really, really super angry and started threatening family members. The doctor came. It became really apparent then at that point that I had lost control and that my psychosis was getting to a very dangerous point, where I had managed it, or at least just shut myself away from everyone, but without the weed to keep me sedated, basically. It all just started exploding. And then, yeah, so I threatened the police via the doctor, which in my country is legal standing for sectioning, which has been sent to a psychiatric unit. Well, if you threaten the police with violence, they can arrest you. But because the doctor knew about it, he suggested that the police bring me to a psychiatric unit, so I can receive treatment. And so, yeah, they got their hands on me. I went peacefully because I thought, at least I'll get a break from my family at the time, and from, it was just a change. Everything had become so unbearable and so unmanageable, and I was just in mental anguish all the time. I thought maybe the hospital might be okay. I'm not going to take their fucking drugs, their dirty tablets, those antipsychotics and all the stuff that I had resisted taking for my whole life. I didn't want to go to a psychiatrist or a psychologist or anything, because I knew they'd just try and put me on some sort of tablets that I'd get hooked on and have all sorts of side effects. Yeah, all those years of psychosis and depression and all that stuff, and never saw a doctor or anyone professional like that, really, because I didn't want a prescription of drugs. And I didn't think that there was anyone, that's all. They're the only people who are around who can help you through a it's like, oh, you're not really that psychotic or whatever until it gets too bad, and then when it's too bad, the only option is to tranquilize you, sedate you with drugs. So I always tried to just keep myself away from that situation, but I just couldn't. Obviously the police came and got me, so ended up going there, and I spent 2 weeks. Oh, here, this will tell you. So they allowed me to pack a bag of stuff, to bring with me to the hospital, clothes and phone charger, whatever. And I brought with me a set of prayer beads, like Tibetan Buddhist prayer beads that I had picked up in Nepal, that I used to wear around my neck all the time. And a hunting knife that my friend had given me as a gift, close to 10 years before that. Yeah. So, and some clothes and books or something. I can't really remember, but yeah, so they obviously take your bag and check your bag when you arrive at the hospital, and I had this hunting knife in the bag. I don't know why I brought it. I had no ill intent. I don't know, but that's the state I was in. I was looking around in my room with the police waiting for me and picking up clothes and stuff like that, putting them into the bag, and for some reason thought I need the hunting knife. There was no, I just remembering this now, really, there was no plan to hurt myself or anyone. But I was like, yeah, I just putting that in there. That's the that was the mindset. I was like, this is normal. Putting a hunting knife into my bag while being brought by police to the psychiatric unit. I'd never been there before, but well, I actually didn't know they were bringing me to the psychiatric unit. Actually, at that time, they were like, "We're going to bring you into the station, and you'll be seen by a doctor there." And so I was like, "Are you bringing me to the hospital?" Like, no, the doctor will decide if they think that you're, if you should be brought into the hospital. Having never been to the hospital, I thought, going to a psychiatric unit is the worst thing ever, that they'll inject you with sedatives, and, you'll just become a zombie, a vegetable. It's something I'd always feared, because being someone who had been enthusiastic about drugs and liked drugs and enjoyed tripping and being stoned and being drunk and being on ecstasy and all the good drugs, I thought that drugs that made you feel nothing, they didn't make you trip, they didn't give you energy, they didn't, they just stopped you operating. And, I'd watched plenty of documentaries and read plenty of stuff and people's testimonials about their time on prescription drugs and all the rest of it, and I knew it's just a massive pharmaceutical industry scam as well, but that's just the way the society is. There's no help until you're cornered and you have to take their drugs legally, basically. And if your behaviour is ridiculous or whatever, they'll force you to take them with force. They'll hold you down and inject you. That's where it goes. There's no real in between for most people. Do you know what I mean? It just spirals out of control, and that's where you end up. And there really should be more buffers somewhere along the line, preventative measures, and but preventative measures are not in the interest of the powerful. Like I was saying, they don't care about your physical health, your mental health, while they're offering the cures or the remedies in the form of tablets and vaccines and all that kind of stuff. They're out there causing the illnesses, or leaving the trail of breadcrumbs out for you to cause the illness to yourself, So they don't care, and I was well aware of that. But yeah, so they brought me to the police station, and I sat there for what seemed like 5 or 6 hours. I'm not too sure, until a doctor who was on call came in, and he was pretty okay. I thought that I was being coherent and having an okay sort of conversation. Tried to explain to him that I just need to, I just can't stand being around people who won't listen to me, and there's nobody to talk to, and I'm not even smoking weed now, and this is all just getting worse and all this kind of stuff. And I thought I was being coherent, and that he'd be like, you'll be alright, we'll let you go back to your family, you're talking sense and all this. I was fully under the impression that I was correct and I was fine, and I still to this day don't know if I was or not. But yeah, the doctor's name was Dr. Nostradamus. I shit you not, that's not a lie. I do remember that much. He was asking me my name, and I was like, "What's your name?" He goes, "Nos." I was like, "Oh." I was like, where are you from? Are you Filipino? And he's like, "Yeah, you got it in one, nice one." It's like, Nos, I never heard that name before. And he goes, "It's short for Nostradamus." His name was Dr. Nostradamus. For those of you who don't know who Nostradamus was, he was like some sort of scholar from a few hundred years ago who made all these predictions and prophecies. That's what he's famous for anyway. I don't know how much of them ever came true, but just as someone who was like arse deep in conspiracy theories and all that kind of stuff, and had been predicting what moves the government were going to make and all this kind of stuff in such a crazy, you could say biblically Armageddon-y type of time in the world, that Dr. Nostradamus was the one who came to decide my fate. you know, yeah, and so he didn't tell me. I suppose we spoke for 15 or 20 minutes maybe, and he made up his mind in his own head. He didn't say anything to me, and he goes, okay, I'll be back in a few minutes. And he left, and he didn't come back. And about another hour or two later, the police came back into the little room where I was, and said, okay, we're bringing you back to your family now, we're bringing you out to the house. I was like, okay, great. And I was like, nice. And they didn't bring me back to my house. They brought me to the hospital. They were kind of softly breaking the news to me as they were bringing me, and I just had to accept it because I was locked into the back of a police car, and we were talking about smoking weed. And the two policemen, I suppose in their early 30s, something like that, they were like, yeah, we wish that, he's like, you wouldn't believe the amount of drunken incidents that we have to deal with, just even the most normal people get a few drinks into them and they're beating the shit out of their wife or crashing their car or causing public, he's just the amount of just completely unnecessary alcohol related stuff, crimes directly caused by alcohol. He goes, it takes up a massive amount of our time, and he goes, we wish people would just smoke a joint. We wish it was legal, and we had like a genuinely legit conversation just about rationality and logic, and like even the police don't want it to be legal. It would make their life so much better. Can you imagine being the ones who are called every time drunk people are fucking getting out of control? Yeah, you'd much rather people who are just smoking a few joints in the park or at home or whatever, in a cafe. And a lot of those problems wouldn't be happening, maybe. But that was that, and yeah, so they took the hunting knife off me, and in the hospital, and then I spent 2 weeks there, and I refused to take any medications. I was like, no, I just need a break from my family. I need to, I'm not taking medication. I just need this break. I need to be away from society at large. I need to be away from the news. I don't want access to my phone. I don't want visitors. I just want to be away. I'm using this as a break. And I got on really well for 2 weeks. I calmed down. It was very difficult to sleep because of the lights at night and people snoring and that kind of thing. But yeah, spent a lot of time in the smoking area speaking with other patients. A lot of people who were really, really troubled, and they were stabilized with medications when they were in there. But for the most part, yeah, I found those people in there to be more real than pretty much anyone I'd met over the previous 2 years, Everyone I'd met in the previous 2 years was either fallen subject to the propaganda of the world or pretending like their own life was totally fine when, people pretending that everything's fine, that their little family unit and everything is fine, and the kids going to school is fine, that their job is okay, and that being in debt is fine, and their health's never improving is fine, and spending all this money and getting taxed up to the eyeballs, and that everything is just fine, the way it is, when it's not. Like the lie that society, that they all tell each other and bolster each other up with just so they can keep going and keep paying the tax, and then something like the lockdown comes along where it's all revealed that the government and their fucking higher up bosses in the billionaire group and all these massive corporations, that they don't care about anyone, only their own pockets, and that the other friends that are on those levels with them, they don't care about them either, you know, but they're necessary for each other to thrive, you know. And like, that's where it goes back to, and all that gets revealed, and people are like, no, it's fine, it'll all be over soon, we'll all just get vaccinated. That's what they said. If we all get vaccinated like a bunch of sheep, they'll let us back out into the field. You know. But in the psych ward, even if people weren't conspiracy minded, in fact I'd had enough of conspiracy at that point, I was burnt out with it, but people in there were there in the spirit of trying to get better. Like, some of these people had devastating mental problems, either for their whole life or for most of their life. Most of them, it was not their first admission. You know, some of them had been there for months and months. Maybe their 10th time. People had been gone in there on all sorts of, you know, you've got schizophrenia, different types of schizophrenia, all different types of depression, people with terrible childhood trauma stuff, you know, that just crushes them, you know. And they can't function anywhere else except in the hospital on loads of drugs, where their food is given to them, and they just sleep most of the time or smoke cigarettes. Do you know what I mean? But they're the most interesting people. They're real. You know, most of the time they have no filter. They've nowhere else to go. Do you know? They've had a life of people pretending that everything's fine. That doctors tell them, oh, just take these drugs and you'll be fine, and you know, and they know they're not fine. You know, they have the truth within themselves, and they know that they're not good, but in there's, you know, services are stretched. There's not enough doctors. There's not enough psychiatrists. There's no psychologists. There's the nurses. Some of them are okay. Some of them are on a power trip. Some of them are just useless. And yeah, so all in all, people are just mostly just left to their own devices 98% of the time. Go to the smoking area, go to sleep, go and read a book, eat. Go to the smoking area, go to bed, walk up and down the hallways, eat. Eat a lot, 3 or 4 times a day. Decent food, that's one of the good things about it. You know, they know that people are easier to manage if they have a full belly, you know what I mean? And a lot of those drugs that people are on, antipsychotics and stuff, they make you hungry. So, you know, they have to make sure that there's food available most of the time in there. So, and it provides structure and routine, having regular meals and all that kind of thing, and that gives people, but you know, people become institutionalized to that, and can't function outside the psych ward in normal life. It's really sad, but yeah, those people are real. They've no problem speaking to other patients about their issues, what landed them in there, what happened to them when they were young, what stage they are at with receiving care, legally, what their family situation. They'll tell you everything, what's wrong with everything, what's right with other things. Do you know what I mean? They're just open books. And it was one of the most refreshing 2 weeks of my life. You know what I mean? It was not the horrible place. It wasn't great. I'm papering over a lot of cracks here. You know, I'm not going into detail about corruption or any of that kind of stuff, or people who should not be in positions of power over sick people. You know, we've all heard plenty of stories about that. It's different when you're in there yourself. But like I said, I calmed down. My mood got quite stabilised. And I made some friends, people who I'm still in contact with now, and people I'm not in contact with now who I spent a lot of time with. I felt like I was almost like a positive influence on some people, because I don't know, I was just somewhat sane. I wasn't doped out like a zombie. I I was able to formulate my thoughts and communicate with people and just let and listen. That's the thing. Being able to listen to people, just being able to sit there and smoke a cigarette and let someone just talk about their life or whatever. And people came to like me for that, because I wasn't doing anything else. Do you know what I mean? And I was, like I said, it was really nice for me, refreshing to hear people being real. Maybe one or two people would talk about the lockdown a little bit, but most people just had such a life of trauma and mental illness and whatever, that the lockdown was just, not it didn't really even factor in. They would have been in and out of the hospital anyway. And yeah, so some good characters as well, some sort of malicious nasty fuckers as well. And yeah, overall funny, you know funny and had a good laugh a lot of the time. There was other people like me as well who were sort of not heavily medicated. And so yeah, so 2 weeks, and then because I wasn't taking medication, I was refusing to take medication, that I was just taking up another bed at that point. That's what they decided, because after you've been admitted through legal process, sectioned by the police, you go in there non-voluntary, you're in there against your will legally, but then a group of directors or whatever decides after a certain period of time whether you're there involuntary or voluntary. If you want to stay there after they think you can be allowed out, then they'll put you as voluntary. And if you're voluntary status, then they can basically kick you out anytime they want. If you're involuntary, you're there for legal reasons, you're there, against your will. Even if you wanted to get out, they wouldn't let you. Then you have to stay there. But if you're made voluntary, they can sort of trick you into that as well. Yeah, so I was made voluntary anyway, and they kicked me out after 2 weeks. Into homelessness. I was like, I thought I was getting on well in there. I was happy to spend more time waiting for, possibly some sort of social housing, or any sort of opportunity that I could get from inside that place. Whether it was just my own little apartment where I didn't have to be around family members or living with people I didn't know, renting a room. Like, I was not able to hold down a job or anything, I should say, at this point. I was in a positive mood, like I was saying, being around those people. But 2 weeks in psychosis recovery is nothing. Do you know what I mean? Getting put back out into the world in the middle of winter. Yeah, it just got more difficult at that point. Luckily, I had two friends, a couple who put me up. And yeah, I was pretty stable when I was with them, because they were realistic folk. You know what I mean? They know the way the world is. They know how corrupt and fucked up everything is and whatever, but they didn't really talk about it too much. They just kind of got on with stuff. They did their work, and they were raising their new daughter, and yeah, they were very kind to me for a couple of weeks. And then I was just getting this feeling into my head. It was like, I'm in their space. I'm trying to get things going. I'm trying to find somewhere to live. I'm trying to get money together. Starting to look for jobs and all this kind of stuff. And then I just got it into my head that I was just in their space too much. You know, even though I was cooking for them and watching their daughter whenever needs be, and you know, not making a pest of myself and being out of control or do anything like that. I was very stable while I was there because I wasn't having to deal with, you know, these were people who were not vaccinated as well. You know, they never bought into the whole scam, whatever. So I felt okay there. You know, I was like sort of, you know, these people are truthful people. You know, they're on the level, and I felt good there. But I still felt like I was just intruding in their space after a while. I don't know how true that was or not, but I made contact with another friend um, in my hometown, and I ended up going there. And I think my friends whose house I've been staying in, I don't know if they were glad to be rid of me or if they were upset that I had just sort of abandoned ship. You know, I'm not really sure because I lost contact with them. So maybe they were just glad to be rid of me. I'm not too sure, but mm. So long story short, went to another friend's house, was doing well there, you know, using my cooking skills and gardening skills, and you know, still, but you know, sleeping on the floor in their living room and stuff. You know, not having my own space. This is one of the biggest problems. Was not having my own space, somewhere to go and close the door, where I knew that, you know, nobody's just going to wander into the room. You know, I'm not going to hear somebody snoring in the bedroom. I'm not going to hear somebody taking a piss on the other side of the wall because the shared bathroom is attached to my bedroom. You know, hearing people pissing and farting, and you know, other people in your house, and you don't want to be in their house. You don't want them in your house, sort of. You know, I didn't have my own space, and that was not helping the mental state. It really not having that place to go, and I'm talking about north of Europe, cold, wet, miserable outdoors in the winter. You know, you're not going out for a pleasant walk and clearing your head that much. Do you know what I mean? For long, anyway. Do you know, you're going to get wet and cold eventually. So yeah, I ended up kind of couch surfing, living in hostels on like a social welfare payment. They had made it so difficult for me to collect any social welfare payments, so I was waiting for weeks and weeks with no money, relying on my friends to feed me and all this kind of stuff. Do you know, I was just thrown out of the hospital. They knew full well my situation, that I wasn't going to go to my family home and all that, that they were putting me out uh, couch surfing with no money and with the potential of ending up on the streets or committing suicide, or you know, because on that side of the country as well, there's no homeless hostels, there's no services for anything like that. And at the time, the whole place was being flooded with Ukrainian refugees, so they were getting all the apartments that were available, all the council houses, all that stuff that was being provided previously to, you know, people like in my situation who had nowhere to go and were mentally unstable and needed needed to have their own place where they could, you know, start to rebuild their life, but weren't able to keep it together enough to actually hold down a job and pay for it, you know. But there was also no space in the only hospital for them either, you know. So there were these sort of accommodations and stuff like that previously available for people like that, but that was all gone. The government said, no, we're just giving everything to Ukrainian refugees, and then all the African refugees and the Middle Eastern and the Asians and all the hundreds and thousands of people who started arriving in Ireland on an industrial level at that time. And it wasn't just people like me, it was people who were working and had plenty of money that couldn't and still can't find places to rent around Ireland, you know. Anyway, that's it, everything. So I was going from couches to hostels to And I eventually got myself a voluntary position in a hostel where I was like making beds and doing a bit of gardening at the hostel and that kind of thing. And I was really enjoying it. It was like beautiful place, really nice people. Most of the guests, the clientele were nice. I was meeting a few people around the local vicinity. I was getting a bit of extracurricular work on farms and stuff. So I was, starting, and my accommodation and stuff was covered and a lot of my meals. So my expenses were pretty minimal. And people liked me. I was, everyone was a bit quirky in that place. You know what I mean? From different parts of the world, and everyone had different interests, and most of them were on the level that the whole COVID thing was a big scam. And when you're on that level with people, you don't even have to talk about it. It's just understood, and then you can get on with your life. But when you're with people who were subject to the propaganda and who believed it and all that, it's just like you're butting heads with that sort of person all the time because they're not on the level with you. Do you know what I mean? You have to get into an argument over anything because you can't agree on certain loads of things you can't agree on because they just didn't see it for what it was, And I'll keep bringing this back to COVID because fair play if you've listened this long, but it's in the title. It's a ramble. It's not a presentation or a thing, but yeah, it's important to remember what that was for 2 years, that had never happened before. Global lockdown, draconian measures, implemented. Maybe you didn't have it too bad, maybe you didn't get sick, or people close to you didn't get too sick or get psychotic or whatever, But, there was a lot of old people in the world at that time, completely isolated. Rural areas, little apartments, and, nobody caring for them. All they had was, don't know how to use the internet and research things, all they have is the radio and the mainstream TV. And they're, for 2 years, these poor people, crippled with fear, putting on 3 masks and gloves and wandering down to the shop and sanitizing everything, thinking that, oh God, if I get one whiff of that virus now, I'm going to be dead in my apartment and no one will even know. Do you know what I mean? Millions of people like that. And the people who implemented the guidelines, the government and the WHO, they didn't care. And if you had a little granny or an elderly parent or something like that tucked away somewhere else in the country, you couldn't go and visit them. They stopped you doing that. You knew that they were being dissolved by the fear of the mainstream media during that time, and there was nothing you could do about it. They did that. They knew that that's what's happening. Whether they planned for that exact thing to happen or not, they allowed it and encouraged it for 2 years. They couldn't get enough of it. They loved it. Not only were they going to be making billions and all that, but they were able to control everyone to the way they wanted to with a few guidelines. Entire governments were doing what they were saying, and then the population following those guidelines. They loved it. So that went on for 2 years, and I keep bringing it back to that because that's what we're all coming from at the moment. The world we're in now is, if you go by media standards anyway, it's crazy. People are realizing everywhere now just how crazy those people are, that they can get away with whatever they want. This Epstein file thing is just another example. That all came out, all those files, everything has been available for years. All that stuff. Do you know what I mean? They just decided to release a censored version of it for the normies. So the normies can fucking listen to Prince Andrew farting and laugh at him, and just like not have the brain capacity to acknowledge the other hundreds and thousands of psychopathic, wealthy and powerful people who are doing all sorts of atrocious things. You know, that's too much for them. They're getting a little hint of it now, do you know what I mean? But it's all just been, yeah, laugh at Prince Andrew, and then this will all go away again. In a couple of months it will all be gone, and they'll have gotten away with that for the first time. They'll have gotten away with COVID for over 2 years. All the wars that have been popping up all over the world since then. Now this Epstein thing, that's all. You know, they're just like, we can get away with whatever we want. We're telling you what we're doing. We're telling you how to believe what we're doing. And we'll just make it go away and on to the next thing. And you'll accept that as well. You know what I mean? So I think more people are starting to realise that now, you know. But most aren't, do you know what I mean? But I've completely tapped out. I do follow this little Epstein thing a little bit now, I have to admit. It's been my guilty pleasure. Not the mainstream version, but, you know, you get YouTubers breaking down, who are reading the files and all, you know, they're, you know. And of course, like, once it all goes out of the mainstream media, all that'll be left is a few YouTubers rattling on about it, you know what I mean, that nobody will listen to. You know, they'll just get shadow banned or censored or strikes or whatever it is, and yeah, and eventually they'll be the crazy ones again. Do you know what I mean? It'll go back to you know, the way it's just so funny the way it happens. Do you know what I mean? It's like the crazy ones now have all been vindicated. Everyone from David Icke, the king of conspiracy theories, and all his predecessors, Jordan Maxwell, and everyone who has come under the umbrella of conspiracy theory, who's been vindicated, that all the theories, the popular ones, all the rest of it that led up to COVID and now and Epstein and all that stuff, it's all true. All the stuff that people have been saying was true all along, that nobody listened to those people, have now been vindicated, right? But still the people who are like, oh, you were right all along, they don't say, oh, you were right all along. They're like, I knew all along, right? I just went along with it. Do you know what I mean? And so, yeah, so actually, in fact, people, truth people, whatever you want to call it, are not being vindicated. I retract what I said just a moment ago. Not being vindicated. Nobody comes around and says, you were right all along. I can't believe it. Not to me anyway, but maybe it happens for the occasional lucky person. But that's just the nature of it. And yeah, they're like, you know, I was like, I've been telling you this for 12 years, 13 years. All these people, these families, these companies, these people in government, their friends, those members of the royal families, all this stuff. I've been pointing all of this stuff out to you for 12 years. There's other people who've been pointing it out to people for nearly 40 years. You know, if not longer. And it was all just, yeah, but sure, yeah, change the subject onto sport or some other bullshit. Do you know what I mean? That can't be true. Sure, that's ridiculous. People aren't like that. People aren't evil like that. Yeah, and then when it turns out that they are, and that they're actually telling you that they are, the people who pointed it out all along being like, told you so. Look, they're telling you right now, they're saying, we're evil as fuck. And then people are like, oh yeah, they're evil as fuck, but it's sort of like a reality TV show now, the way they've presented it. You know, the newsreaders kind of giggling, and Epstein being made into almost like a sex symbol. All these portraits of him, pictures of him, most of them where he looks handsome, almost, and well dressed, and hobnobbing with the elite, and he's almost sort of like a fictional character, but completely real. Like a Bond villain, but yeah, like, but yeah, it's presented with the same colours and the same music and the same editing and all this kind of stuff as their favourite reality TV shows and Netflix movies, so they can't tell the difference, you know. So even though it's right in their face, they're telling you, we're putting it right in your face. And they're like, their brain is telling them it's just more fiction. You know, it's just like, they'll never vindicate us. Because they just can't bring themselves, they're not aware to it. And ignorance is bliss, I suppose, for sure. But so psychosis. Yeah, that's what I would consider, giving yourself a pat on the back. You're not wrong. There's probably not people coming after you trying to kill you or poison your food or any of that, really targeted individual kind of stuff going on. That's a little bit of just intelligence turning against you in the wrong direction, and I know it can be super difficult because it's perception, and what's happening inside you is not, it's not matching up with what's going on around you in a way, and so what's going on around you is filtering through a misperception and appearing as your reality. And you're not wrong, but you have to learn to identify that. And if your psychosis, which seems to have happened a lot, came about during the lockdown time, maybe you're right. Maybe it just too much went in on the side of the balance of huge portion of humanity went into a mass psychosis, an induced mass psychosis through fear, that the little blinkers they had on just got welded over their eyes, and they just started puppets on a string dancing a dance, and whatever little, the truth in you was more than the truth in them. And it can be hard to deal with that. And so I feel for you if that's what you're going through, or see someone that's going through that. Maybe just, if you have the opportunity, if you're a loved one or whatever, or yourself, go to a forest and just say it to yourself. Say what's going on. Don't use your phone or write it down or anything. Just go and just listen to yourself speaking about what's going on. Send a voice message or record a video or whatever, like I'm doing now. And listen back to it. Don't be like, or, do whatever you want, but, listen to yourself. And because at the end of the day, you're your own best medicine. You're your own best doctor and psychiatrist and all that. And once you start getting in touch with the truth within yourself, then, you're on the road to recovery. You're on the way out of it. And that's the trajectory. Once it starts, it's still, it can be painful and rough and all the rest of it along that path, but you're on the path and you just have to keep going. And listening to yourself is one of the best ways. Getting away from whoever it is and just listen to yourself. Talk to a tree. Tell them what's going on. If it takes 4 hours, tire yourself out with it. And then, go and ask for help. Ask for help. If you're like me and you didn't want to take medications, I didn't the first time around, and then I went out into homelessness and went on a big tangent. I was in that hostel, speaking with people who are on the same level, so we didn't have to talk about conspiracy things because we all understood that. So we were more focused on living a better life, improving the hostel, looking for opportunities outside and building a community and living positively and being fit and healthy and growing good food and eating, cooking and meeting people from around the world and building connections. And it was just more that sort of a thing. It was a beautiful environment. But of course, I got back heavily when I was thinking, oh, everything's nice now, everything's good again. Time to start smoking loads of weed again. Do you know what I mean? It kind of fell into that lifestyle a little bit. And, but then I missed a couple of days' work because I was too stoned out of the house that was away from the hostel, and I couldn't make it back. And I got fired from that lovely position. Luckily, I had some friends in the next town who had a couch for me again to crash. I'd had my own bedroom there, and I had responsibilities and nice people around and all that kind of stuff, but I messed it up with weed. And then I thought, oh, I've messed it up with weed again. I'm going cold turkey off very large amounts of strong cannabis. And then I started becoming psychotic again. And I didn't have my own space again. And there was people coming into my friend's house after being in the bar all night, drunk and making noise, and I wasn't getting any sleep. And then I was working in a very busy restaurant, and yeah, and then I got news that my father, in a different up north from where I was in the country, he was hospitalized for like seizures and a stroke. And that was it. Lack of sleep, no space to myself, going into withdrawals from cannabis, psychotic symptoms building and building, rage building. And then my father, who had taken probably 5 or 6 vaccinations, quote unquote, at that time, was like, this thing I told him would happen if he was taking vaccines, this has happened now. And yeah, got some time off work, went to visit him. They had stabilized him with medications and care. He was in hospital, obviously, and all this. Hadn't seen him for a while or really spoken to him because he didn't have anything. I was just too busy off doing my own thing. And yeah, it became evident to me within a couple of days that he was going to be alright. So I went back to my job down at the south of the country, but still sleeping on the couch and that. And it was just, my friends at the time were good to me and everything, but I just couldn't sleep, and I just got more and more erratic. And I tried to check myself into the nearest hospital, and I was clearly psychotic. I was like, if you don't take me in here, I'm willing to take medication this time. I'm going to really hurt someone. My anger is just getting out of control. I had taken the bus there, and yeah, I had nearly become really close to attacking someone. I was just so tired and worn out and everything. And that's what actually any expert on psychosis will tell you, is that what leads to it every time, whether it's a drug-induced psychosis or just normal psychosis, is lack of sleep leading up to it. Happens every single time, whether it's because you've been awake on crystal meth for 2 weeks, or you're having withdrawals from cannabis, or just, the way schizophrenia just onsets into people in their 20s or whatever. Every single time it's a lack of sleep that leads to the break. And yeah, that's what happened. And went to that hospital. They wouldn't take me. They're like, I don't know why. They didn't really give me a reason. They just spoke to me I was waiting around for hours and hours and hours, just, yeah. And I started kicking chairs. I can't remember what I did. I was there with all my bags. I had packed everything from my friend's house, all my belongings, and I was there with a rucksack trying to get admitted into a psychiatric ward because I was going to do damage. And they just left me, what's that word? marching back and forth, pacing around the entrance to the hospital for hours and hours. It was all day. I got there in the morning and it was like night time by the time I found out that they weren't going to take me in, and I was just left there. So I had no choice but to get the bus all the way back up to where my father was, basically in the town next to the hospital, and go to my home house, which was quite nice, because or to my father's house, because he wasn't there. So I had the whole place to myself, and I was able to sort of calm down and get some sleep and play with the dog. And yeah, but but I had snapped properly at this point. Like, it had come to fruition. The nearly dying from COVID vaccines had happened to my family members. Like, I tried to prevent from happening, and they wouldn't listen to me, and they went ahead and got vaccines and everything, and then hospitalization. Long story short, I was so out of control, ranting, and I was just so angry, like screaming anyone who would come near me. I was just like, you wouldn't fucking listen to me, you wouldn't listen to me. And it was just like that, except escalating and escalating until the point where the doctor called the police again, and the hospital people came and took me back to the same hospital that my father was in, except I was in the psychiatric unit. So he was in the stroke ward and I was in the psychiatric unit at the same time. And I started getting heavily medicated, and I was in there for 6 weeks. And it was not as enjoyable as the first time around. Public system. Very little services, like I was saying, just left to your own devices all day, except this time I was just becoming accustomed to these antipsychotic drugs. Which weren't working. They weren't, it wasn't doing anything for me. Couldn't sleep properly. 6 weeks of that. Then I eventually used my health insurance to get into a much better facility in the capital city, which I spent another 6 or 7 weeks in, and I got more stable there, but they increased my doses of antipsychotics and other things while I was in there, but made some more friends. People liked me there. I had my own room in that place. In the public place, it was a ward, with like 10 or 12 other people, who were all quite mad. Snorers and people screaming in the middle of the night and all that kind of thing. At least in the other place, I had my own room. So that takes me up until, 2024 maybe, early 2024. 3 months hospitalised. I got out and went back to live with my mother, and I was on heavy doses of antipsychotics, risperidol. Risperidol? Anyway, that one. And I was like, yeah, just the side effects were just so awful. The psychotic symptoms were gone, to be honest. I wasn't hearing voices. I wasn't angry because I wasn't able to be angry, but I wasn't happy or joyful or peaceful or sad or anything. There was just nothing. All I was able to do was sleep and smoke cigarettes. Didn't even really have much of an appetite because the constipation that those tablets gave me was... I would wish it on my worst enemy, because that's what they deserve. If I have enemies, I'm not sure, but if I did, that's what I would wish on them, is a life of antipsychotics and constipation. Like, you're going to maybe find this crazy, maybe you won't, but I didn't take a shit for 3 months. Yeah, 3 months. The hospital, before the second round of hospital, the second place I was in for 6 weeks, right? It was about halfway through that period that I took my last shit, right? A solid dump. I remember it clearly, and then it was 3 months at least before, it was actually much longer than that before I took a proper shit. But I was like, weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks were going by, and I was not able to take a shit. Didn't matter what I ate, how much water I drank, if I did squats, if I went for walks, anything. Nothing fucking made my digestive system work properly. Laxatives didn't matter. Nothing would work. And so I was like, I have to get off these tablets. And I started weaning myself off them, knowing that they were just a band-aid over the real problem. I wasn't experiencing the psychosis, but I wasn't experiencing anything else either. Only deep, deep frustration and worry that I was going to end up having to get surgery on my colon or end up with bowel cancer or, um, you know, and yeah, just awful, awful, not having the energy to do anything, and then not wanting to eat because, you're putting food in and there's nothing coming out for months at a time. Just fucking terrible. And then visit the local psychiatrist once a month or something like that, and they're like, "Oh, you should eat more fruit." And I was like, "No, you don't understand." Yeah, dreadful. I was like, so I started reducing the dose myself. I looked up loads of stuff online and all that, and I knew, yeah, so the plaster was over the problem, the band-aid, but I knew that the psychotic symptoms were going to come back. I knew that it was all still happening, because reality is reality, and it's the way you perceive it. This is what I'm saying. The truth is there for everybody, and yeah. So I knew that this numbed out, shutters down, non-functioning version of semi fractionally comfortable reality that I had sort of gotten used to because of the medication, not having to do anything, not having to go out and meet anyone, having an excuse to not go anywhere or do anything and just sit there and watch TV shows like a useless, you know, that's fine. If you have to go through that period, if you're battling on with the psychosis or depression or anything like that because you don't want to take medication and you don't want to end up like that, I totally understand, right? But if you if you, like I was saying, if you hang on to that shred of sanity that you have, and you know that if you do go on those tablets, it's not going to be forever. The psychiatrists and whoever else who prescribes that for you, or whoever you deal with in order to get the medication and start that section of your life, if that's what you choose to do or are forced to do, you don't have to be on them forever. They will insinuate that you're going to be on them long term because that's in their interest. If you're on those things, sure, you might have some side effects and your life might not be operating at full capacity or whatever. Or maybe it will. Maybe it's exactly what you need. Maybe you get the right one and you get the right dose and you can go about your life perfectly. Maybe that's, it doesn't work for everyone. It works for few people, sort of, But yeah, know that you can get off them, and that if you hold that resolve in your own soul, knowing that, okay, I'm tapping out, I'm taking them, I'm going to give myself 6 months or a year, 3 months, whatever it is, to calm down and to get my mood stabilized and to not have the racing thoughts or the voices or the impulses or the whatever, just so I can feel flat and empty and shut down for a period of time. But know all along that Just keep it in mind that you're going to get off them safely. That you're going to go to your psychiatrist and say, I've had enough of this. I'm ready to try and start getting back to my life. I want your help or guidance to help me wean off these things. I'll work with you. You have to work with me. If you don't work with me, I'm just going to stop taking them. I'm going to do it anyway, whether you help me or not. So obviously it's different if you're in a hospital setting, then you kind of have to take what they give you. And if you're showing improvement, and still you have that power to recognize your improvement and to force them to work with you, to start reducing the doses and to prove that you're improving and to make efforts to improve yourself, whatever it is. Meditation, exercise, better diet, creative outlet, talking to people, listening to your own voice, sending voicemails, listening back to them. Like, he's like, am I sane? Am I getting back to reality? Do I need these tablets now? Can I get off them? And just know that that's what you want to do. And do it. And you can do it. And you can get off them. And things might start going back to the way they were. Your mental state, the mind might start racing again. You might start hearing voices again. It might be all those things. And then, a lot of people end up going back on them within a year of getting off them. There's some statistics you can look up on that. Do you know what I mean? And then something like 70% of people who get off antipsychotic drugs end up back on them within a year, and 90% of people end up back on them within 2 years. So 10% of people who are on antipsychotics for having psychosis related conditions, and if they get off the tablets within 10% don't go back on them. You want to be part of that 10%. We want that 10% to be more, right? That's basically why I'm talking about